You don't need to be a tech person to care about cybersecurity.
It's more than just about protecting networks, it's ultimately about protecting people.
The human factor in cybersecurity often gets neglected, and we are here to bridge that gap.
Are you ready to get lost in Siberia with us? So, imagine you wake up one morning and there's no water or power in your house. Initially, you probably think that there's a power outage. Maybe the council's doing some work in your area. But then you notice there's not even any reception on your phone. Nothing seems to be working. It's a CrowdStrike outage all over again, except worse. So you go out on the street and you see some neighbours talking. Well, you assume they're your neighbours because you've never spoken to them before. A few people say they've heard whispers of a cyber attack and the government's pointing fingers at a foreign nation. But no bombs have been dropped, the army hasn't been deployed, and the question is, who makes the rules? Welcome to Lost in Siberia. We're your hosts, Annie May
and Anika.
And today we're going to be looking at cyber diplomacy and why it matters more than ever for Australia, our region, and for every person listening right now. We want to stress that we're not diplomats, but cyber diplomacy affects those working in cybersecurity, whether you like it or not. A lot of people don't understand cybersecurity, and if you mention the word policy to a cybersecurity professional, you'll tend to see their eyes glaze over. But this stuff is important, and in our current geopolitical climate, it's more important than ever. Before we jump into it today, if you like listening to this podcast, please give us a 5-star rating on whatever platform you listen to us on. Or if you're listening on YouTube, give us a thumbs up on the video. It really helps small creators like us continue our passion project. Okay, so, Anika, what is cyber diplomacy?
Oh, now I'm too scared to answer anything. Yes, so cyber diplomacy, the way that I imagine it, which helps me, is that imagine if all the countries were just like kids playing in one sandbox, and you have to have some code of conduct, essentially. And if you think about the international community and the UN, and we have Geneva Conventions and other conventions and so on, and you have to respect them, otherwise you will be sanctioned, etc. So it can be a little bit more similar to that, but essentially it's use of diplomatic tools and negotiations and international agreements to manage the behavior of the sandbox, which is the cyberspace. However, it's not mandatory for the countries to join it. They don't have to do it. And it's very hard to enforce it and also notice who is playing by the rules and who isn't, because it's quite hard to attribute certain crimes to someone. The cyberspace is designed in a way that you can mask who you are. As you said, like, you assume that they're your neighbors because you have never spoken to them. Yes, who are they? Like, do you know them? Maybe they are masking, pretending to be someone that they're not, which is very easy to do technically, and to say, or even sabotage someone and say, like, this is the country that attacked another country, while it's a complete third country pretending to be that. So it's a very difficult space to navigate. And we have a big problem with tech in general, and definitely cybersecurity, because the pace that it evolves in is not really sustainable, or doesn't really gel well with the way that we have built our political systems, our legal systems, our criminal justice systems, and also our international community systems. And so I think cyber diplomacy is such a valiant attempt of the UN and also other international organizations and non-for-profits to try and help out. And you may be listening to this and thinking, oh, I don't care. But exactly like what Anime just mentioned, this is how it affects you. So it affects every one of us, because we are all in this sandbox. We are all extremely dependent on the digital networks, on the cyberspace. And you would think, oh, well, but water and electricity is not dependent, but it is. And so this example, for instance, was very relevant for Estonia in 2007, when a certain country, I think we can all think of who they are, has attacked them.
I think it's okay if you name them. We all know it was Russia.
It's Russia. It's Russia. Don't tell anyone. Yeah, but I mean, and that's the thing about attribution, because they can deny that and say, oh, it wasn't us, right? It was some, someone in Western Ukraine who doesn't like us, or in Eastern Ukraine or whatever, they shot the plane, it wasn't us, right? Sorry, that's a different case. But I mean, what happened in Estonia brought down their banking systems. It essentially put their country to a complete halt, which was a good thing. It turned out to be a good thing for Estonia, because they became so cyber resilient from this incident. And that's why they started something that is called Tallinn Manual, which we will link as well in the show notes, where they tried to explain what constitutes as an attack. When do the sovereign borders are crossed, essentially, when it comes to cyberspace, which is really hard to do when it's the internet, because there is really hard to determine sovereignty. Essentially, with international law and also just any law, criminal law and so on, sovereignty is very important. For instance, for Australia, we are a federated country. So we have the federal law, and then we have the states and territories. They also have their own laws. And so how do you then say, if you have somebody that is attacking you that comes from overseas, then are they attacking the country, or they're attacking a particular individual, or they're attacking a particular entity? And so what exactly are the remedies or the sanctions that you apply? And for Australia, it was a case, for example, for Medibank. And to those of you who don't know, it was a really big attack on our health insurance private organization that I think it was about 9.7 million records of people that got hacked, and I think then placed on the dark web with extortion mechanisms, like saying, so if you don't pay us certain money, then we will release it out there and so on. And eventually they did attribute this attack to, again, a Russian national, and they have sanctioned this national and so on. But it just shows how difficult this is if another country doesn't play by the rules of cyber diplomacy. And what are the rules, you may ask? Anyway, so there are 11 norms, and I won't mention all 11 because it will be kind of like a list. So I'll just mention the principles of it. But it's to respect the sovereignty of other states and countries, to respect the fact that we want to keep each other safe. We don't want to harm each other on purpose, to not use our systems, our technology, to attack one another, to help each other in incident response, to help each other in business continuity where we can. And also, if we do know that something is happening that is connected to our country, to try and stop it so it doesn't affect others as well.
Yeah, it's also probably worth mentioning that the 11 norms of responsible behaviour in cyberspace are not mandatory. So there's actually no requirement for any country to actually follow them. And also the 11 norms also fit into this kind of wider framework, which also includes international law. So it's kind of part of a broader framework that people who work in cybersecurity, as we often think of frameworks like the ISM, Essential 8, we kind of also see the cybersecurity strategy for Australia as that overarching piece of it. So it's kind of similar, but I guess more for the policy folks as their guiding light.
And again, it's, as you said, it's not mandatory. There is no international auditor that is going to come to your country and see and check if you are compliant with every norm in the 11 norms.
And that would never work either, right? Because no one's going to let someone in to show them that.
Absolutely. It's a very different space to work in. So you have to rely, rather than on strict regulation and enforcement, you have to rely on those diplomatic tools, on sanctions, on negotiations, and hope that it works. And then if it doesn't work, then you need to start thinking about your neighbors. You need to start thinking about those people, and those, when I say people, I say those countries that are around you. Who is going to support you if something does happen? And how will you support others as well if you can afford it? Because if you get attacked, for instance, who will help the ones that are next to you to not get attacked as well? So you want to also build resilience in your local area. And let's say, like, for example, for Australia, it's the Indo-Pacific area. It's our neighbors with Southeast Asia and so on. Australia does think about them, and we will cover this later in the episode. But this is why this is so important, and that is why it actually does affect you. Because it's not that we have certain countries that we know are definitely bad and we just don't want to play with them. We don't know essentially what will happen. I think Stuxnet is a very good example, which was an attack that it is attributed to Israel and the USA. Maybe not formally. I don't think anyone has actually taken accountability from those countries, but it was essentially a cyber attack that was implemented through USBs, and they had a Stuxnet virus on them, and they affected the way that the Iranian centrifuges were working. So Iranian couldn't essentially progress with their nuclear program.
And
So-
for anyone who doesn't know, a centrifuge is basically a spinning wheel, and they had thousands of them in these nuclear facilities. Basically, they separate uranium into two types, from my understanding. So they have to spin at a specific speed, and then what Stuxnet actually did was it made them out of whack in terms of how quickly they could spin. But it's interesting, if you read the book by Kim Zeta, which is about Stuxnet, it's called The World's First Cyber Weapon, I think. In that book, it talks about how we don't really have any real evidence as to how much Stuxnet actually affected the nuclear facilities, because obviously the Iranians are never going to tell us, right? Like how many actually were affected. And also, we also know, like, there is evidence to show that there was already a lot of issues with the nuclear facilities to begin with. So how much Stuxnet actually contributed to that downfall at Natanz is still questioned today, and I guess we'll never really know.
Well,
as well.
It will remain a mystery in the cyber world. But what did happen that we know of is that the fact that the Siemens machines, they affected, and they were essentially exploiting a vulnerability in those, the virus managed to get out of the Natanz facilities to the other countries in the world. And this is how people found out about it, that it was happening. So they were essentially, like, whoever did this, right? And I think we pretty much know that is the US and Israel, didn't just affect one country. They actually affected the whole sandbox. They affected the whole international community. And this is where it becomes really interesting for cyber diplomacy, because if you don't play by the rules, it actually affects everyone else as well. And I think we also seen this in Snowden files, when we found that NSA knew about vulnerabilities in Microsoft, I think Eternal Blue, that was later then used by the Russians to exploit it and then attack their neighboring countries. So everything is interconnected, and then you have to trace it and you have to trail it. And so if we just play by those norms, we can try to make sure that we don't get affected. And it goes down to an individual level in the end of the day, right? I would recommend, if you want to see what happens when you don't have electricity, water, and internet, to watch a documentary called 3 Days in Mariupol, which was about the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine war. It's brilliant because it shows to you that after 3 days with no water, no electricity, no internet, and this chaos that was happening, people don't act nice. People will stop acting by the norm.
We saw what happened during COVID with toilet paper.
Yes.
And now with the bloody fuel shortage.
Yes, and people were having a jolly good time compared to Mariupol. They had toilet paper, they had their bread. It was hard mentally for a lot. Like, it did, obviously, I'm not denying how huge the effect of it is.
Oh, no, but it was ridiculous. People were stockpiling toilet paper.
Yeah, exactly. So with the 3 days in Mariupol, it shows that
that's
people...
a different situation. I can understand why those people were not having a great time.
Yeah, but for instance, like, people were actually breaking into stores. So, like, the stores were shut down. So people started breaking windows of those stores, stealing hair dryers, stealing, Xboxes, things like that. And you go, like, why do you even need it? There's no electricity.
Well, they don't, do they?
They don't. But
it's stealing it because the opportunities available.
Because opportunities
to them.
available. But then it also goes to the fact that people will start stealing food from each other. There is no water. So and you have one person that perhaps has some kind of a generator somewhere, and you find a person next to you that has a generator. I think take this out of this episode. And so you can charge your phone, so you can try and find something to connect to. But then the Russians also shut down, I think, the satellite, and then put their own network over Ukraine and over Mariupol and started broadcasting their own news onto them. And creating this misinformation or propaganda of, like, the Russian regime and so on. So brilliant, watch it, because it's real. And it has happened. It will happen. And this is what we are here discussing, the cyber diplomacy, because it does matter so much right now and moving forward. So let's talk more about Australia. And I know that we have a lot of listeners from Australia already, but it also may be interesting to Australians, but also for those who are listening to us from the US and other countries. Australia is very interesting because it's a country and it's also a continent. And we are an island as well. So we are very unique in that way. And before attacking the cyberspace was a threat vector, Australia did enjoy quite a lot of security by being far away from the rest of the world to an extent. And it's very interesting to see because we were always thinking about it, and I think they've mentioned it when they were doing the cyber strategy. We're always thinking about the attack that's like, it's going to take 10 years for something to get to us. And it gives you that false sense of security. You become quite blasé. So you're like, we go to the beach, we watch Neighbours and whatever Australian stereotypes are right there. But it doesn't work the same way in cyberspace because we are very much interconnected. And then we also become very dependent on the internet as well to function. And so are our neighbours as well in the region.
And also our physical isolation doesn't help in the digital world.
It does not help. No, it's a catch-22, yeah? You want to be close, but you want to be far. Keep your enemies close. And Australia is quite big and vast. So like most of the land in Australia is not populated at all. So it actually becomes very hard for us to make sure we have internet throughout the country. And there are quite a lot of attempts to make it happen. And we are still not very good with our internet speed. I think we are currently ranking 48th in the world, which is pretty low for a Western first world country.
Yeah, don't come to Australia if you want fast internet.
Yes. No, if that's your only reason, then don't come here. Just go to Singapore. Like they're leading it. So their speed, for example, I think is around 420 or so, while we are at 152.
Wow.
Yeah, I know it's a big difference. What's really funny, and this is like the most recent research, is that we are just 2 spots above Moldova, which is where I come from. Well, my family comes from. It's considered to be one of the poorest countries in Europe. And it gives you a bit of an idea about the fact that we are very much dependent on our internet, but we are not really good because of our physical terrain. It's not really easy for us to even make sure that we have internet without a war situation. So you can imagine how a war or a warlike situation or cyber war can affect us if something does happen. Or it could be just that somebody cuts off our subsea cable or by phishing attempt or by a natural disaster or something else, it is going to affect us quite a lot. And this leads me to the fact of how does Australia do cyber diplomacy and what do we do in the region? And I will pass the mic metaphorically to you, Anime.
I got my own one.
Yes, to talk about that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I want to go a bit deeper now into looking at Australia's relationship to Southeast Asia and the Pacific. So when we think about the Pacific, when we think about Southeast Asia, I think the first thing that I always think about is how much Australians love traveling to Southeast Asia and the Pacific, whether that's on a cruise ship to like Vanuatu or spending a couple of weeks in Bali, just having a nice relaxing time. But yeah, we often don't think about the relationship on a diplomatic level, and Australia has close ties with both countries in Southeast Asia and the Pacific. That's both due to our proximity to these countries, but also Australia is seen as the leader in this area, right? Like we are not only the biggest country by size, but we also, our cyber maturity and other aspects, not to say that there's the problem with Southeast Asia, right? There's a big discrepancy between countries that are more mature and the ones that are really struggling. So that's why our relationship with these countries, say with like the more cyber mature countries like Singapore, are really important because we can then not only help Singapore, but help Singapore help those countries. And so it's kind of like a flow-on effect. So, and the reason why it's so important that we need to help these countries, because you could easily think, oh, well, why does it matter? Like if we're safe, isn't that good? And yes, it is important that Australia is secure, but also we're going to have relationships with these countries regardless, right? So if someone tried to attack another nation, say Fiji, for example, and then Fiji's government has contact with us and they're sharing data, they're sharing systems, they can then try and use that as a backdoor entry into Australia. So it is really important that those countries are secure and that we help them with that, because if they're not secure, we're not secure. So it's that flow-on effect.
Yeah, but know your neighbors as well, right? If something does happen,
like going back to the start.
Yeah, exactly. Like know your neighbors. Like
who are they?
Who are they? Who are you? What do you do? Do you have subsea cables? Do you have cyber resilience? That's a question to ask your neighbor next time you see them. And with Fiji, right? Like maybe they're not the strongest in cybersecurity, but if we uplift them and something happens to us, then we can actually rely on them to help us as well.
Yeah, exactly. And again, that comes back to what we were talking about before about attribution, because it's that safety in numbers. If one country calls out another country, it doesn't really have as much impact as it does if a whole group, for example, we've got the Quad, which is Australia, India. What's the other country apart from the US? Is it the UK? No. Well, yeah, so there's the Quad, and we've also got AUKUS, which is the big one, obviously, that's been in the media a lot because of the submarines. I think, like, it's funny because I feel like you just see them in news and you go, okay, like, whatever, like, what is AUKUS, you know? It's just, like, another thing that we're spending money on. Because, I mean, like, I can understand from a taxpayer's perspective, it's just, like, cool, like, what is that? Why do I care about that? Yeah, and the reason why these relationships are so important is because when things do start to get worse, and as we've seen recent times, when those relationships start to degrade, then you really need to think about your own security. But going back to Southeast Asia, I think the big thing is the digital amount of people that are on the internet now in Southeast Asia has just exploded in recent times. And I think that's a really important point to make because, and the big thing in Southeast Asia, and like I've traveled a lot in Southeast Asia as well, is people don't have the income to spend on a laptop. Okay, so everyone is on their mobile phones. Mobile phones are cheap. You can get like a mobile phone for like $20 versus a laptop, which is going to cost you maybe $1,000 if you can find a cheaper version. Nowadays, I think they're getting more and more expensive because of the AI chips and stuff in them. But yeah, so there was a stat that came out, and I think it was DFAT that published this, but the amount of online users in Southeast Asia has now hit 460 million people, and that was in 2022, so I don't know what it is now. And the problem is there's all these people online. Everything's done online now with banking and e-commerce and all that kind of stuff. And Southeast Asia is kind of like this emerging market, right? If it's important financially, then it's going to be a target. Other countries are going to see as like, cool, let's go hit them now because they're all online, but they don't have that maturity to know what are the dangers of being online.
New money.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
New money without the lawyers.
Yeah.
And the offshore Switzerland accounts. Yes.
Yeah, and the lack of, and that's actually a good point to make because a lot of these countries are quite corrupt. So there's a lot of corruption, especially if you're looking at countries like Laos, Cambodia, Thailand to a certain extent, although Thailand at least is a bit more stable as a country. But yeah, if we look at in the Pacific as well, so the Pacific is different to Southeast Asia because Southeast Asia is just, you've got a lot of different countries, their cyber maturity levels, there's a whole range in between. The Pacific is a whole other kettle of fish because they're just like out in the ocean. Everyone jokes about island time. It's a real thing. I've had friends who've lived out in the Pacific Ocean, not in the ocean though. Like they're not living underwater.
Are you friends with their sharks and whales? Yeah.
I've had friends who've lived in Fiji, for example, and on a daily basis there is at least one power outage. Like it's just normal, right? Just to be no power for like half an hour. They just don't have that resilience to be stable. And so that's where Australia kind of comes in to be like, hey, what can we do to kind of help you? The other issue with the Pacific is that a lot of these countries are quite poor. And so what that means is they can be very influenced by countries that are able to come in and say, hey, yeah, we've got a bunch of devices we don't need. Oh, you need Wi-Fi set up. Like for Australia, the reason why we're really putting in effort right now with the Pacific is because of that influence from China. And we've seen like what has happened when we've neglected that relationship with the Solomon Islands, for example, where China then came in and said, yeah, we can help you police the country when you have civil unrest. And yeah, we'll bring in our own police. We all know what Chinese police are like. Like they ain't the friendliest people around. So it's really important to understand why these relationships are important. And obviously we've already talked about like because we need to secure ourselves in the digital sphere, but it's also as important in the physical sphere as well. So and coming back to, I guess, Australia, we've also seen Australia ban Huawei from its 5G network in 2018. However, we've seen Pacific Island nations have been offered this digital infrastructure from China and they've accepted it because they don't have anything. So like, and it must be so hard for like some Pacific countries because they don't want to be seen as a charity case, right? It's like, oh, here's our leftovers, you know, oh, we don't need these routers. And I think like that's why it's so important that we do provide, not only like give them things, but to like give them actual ongoing help and training so that then they have staff in their countries who can take that lead and then actually be in charge when something happens.
Yeah, so we don't give them fish, we teach them how to fish so they can get the fish themselves.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So, and I think that's really important. So the Coral Sea cable was an example of this. And there's also what's it called? The Cyber Cable Resilience Centre that Australia has with the Pacific.
Do you want to explain a bit more on the cables?
Yeah. Oh, the subsea cables? Yeah. I mean, well, let's just briefly touch on it because I feel like we could do a whole episode on that
and
alone.
we probably will, yeah.
Yeah. So basically, for anyone who isn't aware, about 99% of how we communicate with anyone in the world is transmitted and travels through these undersea cables that lie in the bottom of the ocean, and they connect Australia to the world, essentially. I mean, obviously, we're not the only ones who have subsea cables, but if I want to talk to someone in the UK or if I want to talk to someone in, I don't know, what's a random, like Greenland?
Okay, yeah.
We can do that, right? And we take it for granted. And I think that's the thing. It's like we don't really think about every day you turn on your computer, it just works. You're like, oh, internet's on, cool. I can like go and do my thing. But we rely on these cables, and the problem is that these cables can be disrupted. Most of the time it's just through a ship putting down its anchor and it's like cut through a cable. But the thing is, repairing them is a much more complicated process than, I mean, laying them is also complicated, but it's also, and people might not be aware too, that we have repair stations as well, so dotted around the country where, how many cables did Jocelyn say we have in Australia? Was it 12? I think it was 12, wasn't it, altogether in Australia?
That sounds right.
Yeah.
I just know that there is like 100% rate of the hyperscalers putting their cables through. But I think also, like, coming back to cyber diplomacy and attribution, it's very difficult to prove that it was another country that has actually like maybe sent a ship somewhere that has now damaged your cable versus just, a random ship that did that. So what a great obfuscating method to attack another country without the consequences from that.
Yeah, because who's keeping watch on all these ships that are like literally in the middle of nowhere?
Yeah, international waters.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I guess another thing to mention is one of the shields for the Australian cybersecurity strategy actually talks about having resilient regions and global leadership. So this is very much ties back to what we were talking about in terms of Australia helping countries in the Indo-Pacific. One of the biggest ones for this is the CPAC program. So that's SEA-PAC. And this is to help countries, basically, if they were hit with a cyber attack, that we would then go in and send a team of cyber security professionals out to assist with that incident response. So basically, it's like, think of like an ambulance, but for cybersecurity. So instead of calling 000, you call DFAT. And so this actual program is called Cyber Rapid. I can't remember what the Rapid stands for because it is another acronym. But again, it's like, how many bloody acronyms do we need to have? But yeah, it's actually a really cool idea. And I think there was a good use case in Palau, which is a Pacific Ocean country, where Australia and the US actually provided support to Palau back in 2024. And this included looking after the government systems and providing them with a vulnerability assessment. And there's even programs like the Australian Volunteers Program. And one of my friends is actually doing this right now. So the government basically pays you to, sorry, they don't pay you, that's the wrong word, but they pay for your flight and then they pay you a monthly stipend to basically hopefully cover your, yes, depends actually. Sometimes it doesn't cover that, but at least it partially covers it. It depends on when you go, because obviously with rental prices and stuff, it can really fluctuate. So it's just like a set amount that they give you. And then hopefully that is enough to cover your rent and maybe a bit of food. And so, yeah, if anyone is interested, you can just go to their website and we can drop a link as well. But there's different programs that they run. I actually was thinking about doing one. They had one for Palau, actually. But it was the logistics of moving to Palau with cats and being in the middle of the ocean. Was a bit logistically hard, and it was more actually the thought of coming back to Australia. But anyway, this is a whole other story. But yeah, anyway, so there's definitely opportunities to kind of, for us as well, like as individual, on an individual level, because I think that's the thing, like people often go, okay, well, these governments have these programs, but like what can I do? So yeah, one of my friends is currently doing a program. It's more like a role revolving around like strategy and helping their government in Fiji to basically help them on a strategic level to try and execute things. And it's about like also building those relationships of like, what can Australia learn from them? What can they learn from us. So it's more of like a mutual beneficial thing rather than being like, you should do this because this is how we do it. And I think like that's a thing, like people often go, oh, well, we obviously must be better because we are more cyber mature. But however, what we do here doesn't necessarily translate. So yeah, that's probably where I might hand back over to you, Anika, in terms of what does Australia actually have in our toolkit to facilitate cyber diplomacy?
Yeah, and I think you've covered some of this now. But I wanted to say with like, why is it important for us to help others in general, and also like obviously that translates then to the international space, right? And we talk about it a lot in the podcast. If you are in cyber, don't laugh at the other people who don't know what they're doing. Instead, change your attitude to actually help them. But also if you have family members or friends or something like this, and they're like, I don't care about my cybersecurity and about my privacy, all my details are already out there in the internet. Well, you can go and tell them, like, actually, no, you should care, because if you post your address online, like, for instance, if it's your family member, then people will come to your kids, they will come to your grandkids, they will come to your friends and your neighbors and so on. And so educating people about it and giving them, teaching them how to fish, allowing them that, like, giving them that skill of how to keep yourself
and that's
safe.
Fish with an F, right? Not PH.
No, it's an actual fish. Yes, teaching them how to fish other countries, how to run cyber. Oh my god!
Just good to clarify, you know.
Yes. No. Teaching them like how to be cyber resilient is going to actually protect you, which is not straightforward. It's counterintuitive, because we are talking about a collective mindset versus an individualistic mindset. But I thought it was very interesting how it translates from an individual level to a international level as well. So as you mentioned, with the Australian cybersecurity strategy, and we have the six shields.
Yeah, six
shields. Yeah. Yes, 7 is a much better number. Why didn't it? Sorry,
it's like the number of Horcruxes Voldemort had.
Yeah, 7 is like it's prime number. Yeah, sorry.
Clearly, they're not Harry Potter fans.
Maybe not. Maybe they're like, maybe 6 is enough. So obviously, like, one of the shields is actually working on our cyber diplomacy and the cyber resilience in the region. Yes, we do have international relations with Europe and with the US, but we cannot always rely on them. We also have to be reliant on our neighbors in the region and also uplift them. We also, since last year, have an ambassador for cyber affairs and critical technology. Now say that 3 times fast. Her name is Jessica Hunter, and we will also drop a few links for that in the show notes.
Yeah, I also mentioned, like, people probably would recognise her name because she used to be head of, was it ACSC or ASD? I can't remember. She was head of one of them. Mm-hmm. So yeah, people would probably already, if you work in cyber, you probably already know that name. And if you don't, that's fine.
And if you don't, then you know
it's not mandatory to know.
Yeah, we're going to do a quiz in the end. And if you don't pass, you have to listen to this episode again. So I hope you've been paying attention. Yes, and this role is very significant because it shows that we are committed to this and we are dedicated to this. We actually have an ambassador from Australia that is representing us. It's similar to how we have a cybersecurity minister now as well. We have it represented on a defense level as well with Michelle McGuinness. We have those people in those positions, and they are essentially tasked with this role to promote this diplomacy and this resilience across the region, from Australia to the ASEAN countries, to the countries in the region, essentially. And we don't remember what Quad stands for, but we know that it's in...
Should we quickly Google it?
So the Quad countries are... Why is it called Quad?
Yeah, I know. I was just thinking, I was looking at the letters, I'm like, Q? Where does the Q come from?
So you would think that Quad stands for Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Australia and Denmark. But actually, it doesn't.
Don't know what all those countries have in common, but yeah, why not? Quad makes me think of when you were at high school, because the quad was always just like where you'd play handball. Oh. Like, you mean, go out to the quad.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of like quads, like leg part. Yeah, well, I don't know why it's called quad.
I guess because it stands for quadrilateral alignment or agreement or something, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just 4. That's all it stands for. It just means 4.
So it's closed now. We have 4 countries, and you can't be in the quad.
I couldn't remember. No wonder you don't know what countries, and you're like, Q. Like, why is it in capital letters? Looks like an acronym.
It does look like an acronym. So it's not an acronym. It's nothing. It's just the first four letters of quadrilateral. And the countries in it, the membership consists of India, Japan, Australia, and the US. And we also have AUKUS, which is...
Actually does make sense.
Does actually make sense, which is Australia, the UK, and the US. Yes, I'm right.
Yeah, that is
Cool,
right.
cool.
Yeah, and also that makes sense because AU, Australia,
exactly.
UK, US, US.
Yes, so if you don't have internet, you still remember that you're part of the alliance because you can't Google it. With Quad, who knows?
Yeah.
Whoever comes to you, the three other countries, you just form a quad with them. It's a joke. It's not how it works.
Please, I really hope no other four countries do form a quad. That'd just be so confusing.
Quad one.
Yeah. Yeah.
The original quad. Sorry. So obviously these groups are very important because they are your strategic alliances. And you essentially, if being a part of it does give you favors in terms of, again, as you said before, incident response, but it can also be tools, or it doesn't have to be cyber tools necessarily. It can also be any other kind of
Training.
Weapons, training, and so on.
And
so
that awareness piece too.
Yes.
Yeah.
For cyber criminal justice as well, Australia is a part of the Interpol countries that are investigating cybercrime. And it took us some time to join them, but it's very important to be a part of these groups because it's also important to share information. So if you're a part of these alliances, information sharing that is protected by a lot of laws because of sovereignty piece that we've discussed earlier becomes a little bit easier when you are a part of these countries. And so we've talked about this attribution piece, and a lot of times when a cyber attack does happen, speed is very important, because if you don't give the attackers the time to cover their tracks, you will actually have a chance to catch the right piece of information that will actually point you to the right attacker. And it takes ages. It can take like a year or two to get the right piece of information to actually attribute something to someone. And so being a part of these alliances does help with the sharing of information, and I guess surveillance as well, but that's a whole different thing. That's the dark side of it. But we know that with the Five Eyes countries, they have been sharing information between themselves for that reason, whether it's information on their own citizens, but also information that helps them attribute certain cyber attackers against their countries. It is helpful. So it is important to be a part of these alliances, but it doesn't come for free. You don't just join and sit there and do nothing. You also have to do work. You have to abide by the principles. You have to also build your own cyber resiliency up. You have to help the other people in your alliance as well. Cyber sanctions is another very important piece.
Which we saw with the Medibank attack.
Yes. So as I mentioned, my family comes from Moldova, comes from Transnistria, which is a disputed territory in Moldova. Talk about international fun. So if you think about it, it's like the OG Ukraine, Donetsk and Luhansk areas. So for sanctions, so obviously like my family has the element of like the Russian culture. And so my family, for example, like my parents, sometimes they will have exposure to like Russian TV and Russian news and so on. And so I can also see how the other countries are reacting to the sanctions against them. So we know that Russia has a lot of sanctions that have been applied to them and on them. And I think after the Ukraine war started, they also, like Instagram has pulled out, a lot of other, social media companies and things like that have pulled out. And it's supposed to work. It's supposed to be a motivational piece saying that, you can't play with us, you can't come here. And the way that we are going to make it happen in an international sense is we are not going to give you the benefits of being a part of the group. Which should work in theory, like it should work. The issue is that they can join a different group. They can be friends with other people and they can enjoy benefits from these other groups as well.
Sorry, this remind me of Mean Girls. It's like, you can't sit with us.
I was referring to Mean Girls. That's great. That's exactly. You can't sit with us.
It's a Tuesday. You're wearing track pants. That's right. You can't sit with us.
Exactly. But this is, it's a bit like, and that's why I was like referring to it like a sandbox, right? It's like it's a play. It's a whole thing about relationships and cliques and groups and quads and all this stuff.
Or like a high school lunch area.
It's a high school
cafeteria.
Lunch, correct. Yeah. Absolutely. And
you got all the names on the different tables, like she does when what's that? Katie joins the school.
She joins it. Yes. Here
she gives her a map.
Yes. Yes. You have the theatre kids and you have the Yes.
Girls who eat their feelings.
Yes, and
girls
girls who don't eat at all. Yes, exactly. And you
Such a good movie.
Yes, and so we think we are the cool kids, we are we are part of AUKUS, and like and so on. But like Russia,
We are the plastics.
we are the plastic. Let's say we are the plastics, right? But obviously, not everyone thinks that.
Yeah.
They adore you, but they also hate you, which is
Also like the plastics.
also like the plastics. A perfect analogy. So proud of this. This is so good. Yes. So if you ever imagine cyber diplomacy, I want you to connect it with the Mean Girls movie. But this is why sanctions do not work as intended sometimes, because they can join a different group. And we know this like in the international cyber law, that there are kind of 3 different groups in terms of international cyber law, because we have like the more Western one where we are talking about openness and ability to access information, and people have the freedom of speech online, and there is respect and so on. But with the kind of like the Russia countries and the China countries, Russia and China and like the Asian countries, like the stands and so on.
Oh my god, I'm sorry, this is a real sidetrack, but I really want to go to the stands. Like it's like on my list. Yeah, I've just been reading a book actually called Sovietistan. It's about a Norwegian journo who travels through Kazakhstan, Tajikistan,
Kyrgyzstan,
etc.
Uzbekistan.
Yeah, Kyrgyzstan. Yeah, so interesting. Yeah.
They have a good food. And Mongolia has the same speed as Australia, so in the internet, so it won't be too much of a difference.
Wow, and like Mongolia is probably like triple the size of Australia, so that's really sad for us.
Yeah, very sad.
And like Mongolia is like mostly people. I mean, this is a bit of a stereotype. Obviously, I mean outside of the cities, but like they just like ride horses and stuff and like live in yurts.
Yeah,
And that's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. So they have their own group, but also their focus is not necessarily on freedom of speech and so on. They're actually using the internet to influence their people. It's more like closed off, and with the Chinese kind of like firewall and so on.
The Great Firewall.
The Great Firewall, that's right. The Great Firewall. Yes, you can't get in and so on. So it's a very different worldview. And it's important to be aware of that, because if we are going to be like, well, you can't sit with us, and they don't care about that, then what else do we have left in our toolbox?
And I think that's also an interesting point to then talk about what has been deemed what could happen one day, which is the splinter net, which is where, because our idea of an open internet is very different to, and this comes back to diplomacy, right? When people get in these rooms and all the people in the suits and they sit down and they're talking about cyber diplomacy, and if one person, say from a Western country, could say a term that to them means one thing, and that term to someone from, say, Russia or China means something completely different, because their idea of what is considered protecting the internet is wildly different. And that's why it's so important to have at least a foundational understanding of the world, even just understanding at a basic level. Yeah, why can't people in China access Facebook? Why can't they access this website? And obviously you can go down a rabbit hole and research this for years, but understanding even at a basic level, like why is that? Why does the government in Russia not allow people to talk about certain things? Why do some people get arrested for talking about certain things? I think even understanding that is like really important, no matter what you do for work.
Oh, it's so interesting as well. It's fascinating, because you have the whole world open up to you, rather than just saying, oh, those meanies in those countries, they're the ones that attack us all the time. But when you start researching the cyber war space, let's call it that, right? Like you'll realize that it's not necessarily them who like started it, or sometimes, like as I was mentioning with the NSA, not telling people about a vulnerability in Windows and Microsoft, like not telling people about a vulnerability resulted in another country, from our alliance being attacked by essentially a hostile country to us, because they have then used what like NSA has created, an exploit, and use it against another country. And realizing how it's all connected is also very important. And then the world view of the other side of the world, not just the global north, but like the other people as well. If you look at the African countries and how they use the internet, if you look at what happened in Myanmar with Meta and how, because you were talking about the poor countries that are susceptible to this kind of things, and how they were just given phones with Facebook on them and zero protections and guidelines on how to use it, and how it resulted in a civil war and genocide. it's so important because we don't speak the same language.
Sometimes literally, yeah.
Sometimes literally, but also we're coming from different cultures, so it's a different connotation. And I think cyber diplomacy is good this way because at least we have people in the room talking about this and trying to influence those relationships. But yeah, it can potentially mean that cyber sanctions, although it sounds pretty cool, like, because we always want to have a sense of justice, right? We want to say, well, but what was done about it? Have the bad guys been reprimanded? Have they been... And we can't do this. We can't necessarily do the same thing in cybercrime. And also like in the war space, like we can't really do this with war criminals anyway, but you know, we are trying to. It's a bit easier when it's like physical warfare. It's impossible to do in the cyberspace. Like, okay, so with the Medibank guy, they're like, oh, you can't come to Australia. And he's like, okay.
I was like, I don't think that dude was planning to. That's the thing I don't get.
Damn.
I was like, I'm sure he's sitting at his computer going, God damn it, I'll have my bloody flight booked for Sydney next week.
It's really, go scuba diving.
Really keen to climb the Harbour Bridge.
Yes, I know. Yeah.
Damn, I was on my bucket list.
Yeah.
What a shame.
Yeah, photoshops himself at like Sydney Opera House being like, you know, bucket list, take it out. What is that?
Scuba diving at the Great Barrier Reef.
Yeah, and I think it sounds to a lot of people, maybe they'll see it on the news and they'll say, oh yeah, government is doing something about it.
And that's what it is half the time, right? It's literally a good news story.
Yeah.
I remember the time going into work and someone being like, oh, did you see the sanctions put on the Russian hackers? And I'm like, and? I was like, what does that actually mean in practice?
Yeah.
I was like, okay, cool. But I was like, what's the reality of that? It's like, okay, good that they're doing something, but does it actually impact anyone?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't impact anyone, but it's the messaging, right? It's the messaging that we are serious about it and we would like to do something about it if it meant anything.
Yeah, they want the Australian voters to know that, don't
Yeah.
worry, we're taking care of it.
Yeah, in whichever way. And it's hard. Like, I feel bad because it's really hard to influence that because, as you said, like as we said before, tech doesn't care about the systems that we have built before that, and it doesn't apply to it. Like, it will just continue evolving, and we are running out of tools that we have, and we need new tools. We need a new way to operate, and this is where policy becomes so important.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's talk about what does this actually mean for, in particular, maybe even if you're not working, maybe you're a student, or if you're working in cybersecurity, what does this actually mean for you? And what, I guess, are there career paths in this type of area if this is of interest to you? The thing is that often is sometimes forgotten, I think, is when cybersecurity, when we write reports in your day job, you might think, oh, this is only relevant to this company, this is only relevant to this organization when you write a report. And again, like that attribution piece, it's like, oh, we have suspicion that it could be this APT group, or we have suspicion that it could be this individual, whatever it is you're writing about.
Advanced persistent threat.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Yeah. We know some acronyms. Hey, hello.
Yeah. No, I mean, I again, it was like one of those things. It's like you just use these terms and you forget that some people might not know what they mean. Yeah. So if you are interested, there's definitely a lot of pathways that, and you don't necessarily have to be involved with government if you are interested in policy. So, for example, like there's organisations like the Australian Signals Directorate, there's Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. There's a T on the end, isn't there? There's Home Affairs, but there's also organisations outside of that you can be involved in without actually having to leave your day job. Okay, so for example, think tanks, like we've got the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. In fact, most of the articles they publish are from practitioners, so people who work in these fields, who have something to contribute because of something you might have seen in your day job. If you are interested in writing for them, you can go to their website, go to the strategist page. There's information on how you can get in contact with them if you want to pitch an idea. We've also written for ASPI as well. People often think, oh, they wouldn't get me to write for them because I'm not, established enough or whatever. And it's like, well, if you get your foot in the door there and you write something for them and it gets published, well, then you are a thought leader, for want of a better word, and you have something to contribute.
Yeah, you're part of a think tank.
Yeah. Actually, we should probably explain what is a think tank. Like, what does that even mean?
I think it's a tank that you connect to the internet. Because it's smart.
When I imagine, like, if I just think of those two words in isolation to anything.
It was a joke.
Oh, yeah, I know. But when I imagine, I think of, like, these brains floating around in a tank, like a fish tank, but with brains.
Oh my God.
Like, it's like in, I was going back to Harry Potter, but, you know, when they're in the Department of Mysteries and those brains attack Neville, I think it was Neville. Feel free to correct me, anyone who's listening. And then it attacks him, and then he becomes like this, like, child or something. Anyway, I always remember that part in Harry Potter.
Maybe
it's kind of creepy.
Maybe I think of it as like somebody who has a really thick Russian accent, and it's like, no, think tank, and they were like, do you mean think tank? Yeah, sorry. And it's like, no, sorry. Yeah, one of those. No, but maybe like really in all seriousness.
Yeah.
A think tank is none of those things, unfortunately. But that would be really fun.
No. So what a think tank actually is, it's basically an organisation that allows people to put forward ideas. And some people work for that organisation permanently. A lot of people just contribute thought pieces. It's about also bringing people together to talk about I don't want to say hard hitting, even though a lot of the topics are, but it's like they don't necessarily have to be. I think it's more about getting different opinions and being able to look at things from different angles. And I think the thing that often people forget, that policy actually can create real change. And I think that's why a lot of people get into this space, because they do want to drive real change. And that can go all the way up to your governments. In a nutshell, that's, to me, what a think tank is. Not brains floating around in a. But it kind of, when you think about it, that is kind of what it is, right? It's brains floating around, providing different perspectives. Yeah.
If we can reduce a human to a brain, yes. No, but it's important, right? Because we've just mentioned this, that we need to have different voices in the room, or in a tank. We need to have different people coming from different backgrounds. And you may think that your circle of influence is very small, or maybe people are not interested in what you think because you come from a certain environment, you come from a certain culture, a certain background. And if you think that, I want you to think that it's even more important that you consider sharing your opinion, your worldview, etc. Because otherwise we're just going to be in a bubble. We're going to be in an echo chamber, which is worse than a think tank. Because you just hear your own echo. I think echo chamber is a great word, though. Like it's a room, and you just hear your own echo. So you coming in and like using your own voice to actually showcase a different vantage point. Look at the house from the hill. Look at the house from the back. Look at the house from outer space, from satellite, from a drone. That's how you actually understand the full picture. So you can find a solution that works. I would really encourage you to do that, because I was very surprised when we got in and like they published our articles, and I thought myself, like, internalized, not imposter syndrome, but maybe self-deprecation, that, like, oh, okay, I come from a different country, my worldview is a little bit different. I come from cyber criminology. I like, being techie and like, tinkering with things, but I'm always thinking about a different thing. And they're like, oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, let's write about it. That's amazing. And that is so pivotal in your career as well, and the way that you think about yourself. So yeah, absolutely do that. And so to close off, cyber diplomacy, it might sound like it's so far away from you, and it happens in some meeting room somewhere, in a think tank, with people wearing suits made of brains, or not. I don't know.
Wait, the suits are made of brains?
I don't know. The brains are wearing suits. One of those things.
That's okay. So we should get AI to create that image.
Jesus. A brain in a suit.
Ask a nano banana, whatever that stupid tool's called. Why is it called that?
I think, yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good question for a stupid name, yes. But actually, I think if you want to take something from this episode, is that policy, however, boring it may sound, is actually very important for you. I think before we were recording this episode, we were referring to Miranda Priestley's iconic monologue about
From The Devil Wears Prada, in case someone doesn't know
In case you don't know who she is, and you should, because,
Well, the second one's about to be released, isn't it, this year?
I'm so excited.
I don't know how I feel about the sequel, but anyway, so that's a different topic.
That's a different topic. But essentially, like, it's her iconic monologue about how you think it doesn't affect you, but you're wearing it.
Yeah, that disgusting sweater that you bought. You might think that not trying to make a statement by putting that on, but actually that it was designed by people
Yes, for
at
you.
the highest levels.
Yes, in that think tank.
in the
think
fashion think tank.
In the fashion think tank. But these policies that affect you has been designed there. And when one day something happens that Anime has mentioned in the beginning of the episode, where you are stranded without water, electricity, you're not able to go on your life as usual, and you don't know who to turn to, somebody is actually trying to prevent that from happening and trying to make sure that even if it does happen, we have friends and neighbors around us that will help us.
Go and speak to your neighbours.
Yeah, go and speak to your neighbors, find out who they are and whether they would like to fix your sea cable. Sorry. No, I'm honestly saying this, like get in touch with your community, find out who they are. If they are vulnerable from a cyber perspective and you know a lot about cyber, then also make them resilient, give them the tools. And if you are the ones that is vulnerable, then find your community in online spaces as well, but in physical spaces, which is very important. Obviously, we are here as well to help with the cyber resilience and bring up the knowledge and the skills. We are teaching you how to fish with an F. And if you would like more content on that, please follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn at the Cybersecurity Gals. That's GALS. And thank you for joining us in this episode of Lost in Siberia.
And we'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.